It's still an honor to be here. So thank you very much for inviting me. My presentation is kind of geared toward when we train trainers to work with people that have these disorders. And so the very nature of a motivational interviewing training is to be engaging. And so hopefully you will find that to be true as I figure this part out. Okay. And so motivational interviewing was started in 1991 with, and with research well before that, but the first book that came out in 1991, and with William Miller and Stephen Rolnick. You'll hear other things, and not that it's wrong, it's just that you'll hear other approaches, person-centered approach, and other different motivational enhancement theory. But if it's called motivational interviewing, there are specific things that are part of the William Miller and Stephen Rolnick motivational interviewing. So if you take part of that out, it really is not motivational interviewing. So what I'll be talking to you today will be consistent with what is called motivational interviewing. So we've changed our minds over the years, haven't we, about a number of things. Our views have changed, right? So in looking at this ad where for 30 days, test camels. So over the years, there's been many changes in healthcare ideas. The other thing that we've realized is that there's been a lot of changes too in the way that we view success. And so this is kind of what we think of sometimes as being a successful move toward behavior change. But actually it's this, isn't it? People go backward and forward, and we have a lot to do with that. And thank every one of you in here for your passion with working with people and helping create change, and the empathy that you have in the work that you do. Because we have a lot to do with whether or not we can push people forward or we can stop them. And that it just is so important, and you can watch that. I've worked with couples where the guy would say, in this instance, the man said, "I will go to treatment." And for the first time, she felt safe enough to tell him all the reasons he should be going. And he began to back up. Well, not really, I don't really, And so, kind of bringing humor into it, I said, no, he's going to go. He's going to go. And if you kind of begin to talk about, I knew you needed to go, you've needed to go for 20 years, it's human nature. That he would begin to back up. And we as therapists, counselors, educators also have that ability to, in helping people, whether or not people move forward or actually getting in their way. So I specialize in co-occurring disorders. I trained in motivational interviewing in 2003 and have done many trainings over the years, but they help me in my work. The approach becomes who you are. And in my work with people with co-occurring disorders. But you can imagine when people present, these are symptoms that people present. They're not trying to ruin our day. They're not being, resistant, as we used to call it, or obstinate. I mean, these are really difficult symptoms to live with. Truly, these people are my heroes. I mean, I come from my, car or my house with a bathroom or, different things that I have in my life. And I come there for people and work with people that feel isolated, that feel anxious. These are the common symptoms of all of these co-occurring disorders. They feel alone even when they're, in a crowd of people. They feel different. They have impaired control. I like using that rather than loss of control, because loss of control sounds like you had control and you lost it. But people with bipolar disorder, as far back as when they were 5 years old, remember having rapid thoughts, fleeting thoughts, parts of thoughts rushing through their mind, and that they did not have control over that. So they never did. And so it's impaired control over anxiety, where the brain says that there's a saber-toothed tiger standing right here, but yet there's not. And how confusing that can be. And so people living with these symptoms, really, I have great respect for the challenges that they face. There's research, just an endless amounts of research. The ones that I because I come to you as a therapist and a direct service provider, that were always the most interesting to me personally, was just one motivational interviewing session can drop the dropout rate in half. Just meeting with somebody the first session and me understanding what motivates them. Is it to get their children back from CPS? Is it to get housing? Is it to get the court off their back? You know, what is their motivation, rather than to assume that I know that they're motivated to be abstinent for the rest of their life and take psychiatric medication. Will drop their dropout rate in half. It also has tremendous influence, all the research, on the amount of drinking, on hospitalizations. So we could talk for a great deal of time about that. Motivational interviewing eventually started with, with smoking and has been used in all healthcare with people with diabetes, people with cancer, anybody looking at a change in a behavior. It's a collaborative approach. I just included two of the definitions, but it's looking at the person's own desire, their own motivation to change. I worked with a young man and assumed, unfortunately, in my private practice that he was wanting to get abstinent because of his 8-month pregnant wife and his 2-year-old little girl. And somewhere along the way, I was working an abstinence-based program. He was working a harm reduction program, and I was missing the whole entire point here. So one day I said, what would you be motivated for to make a change in your use of pot? Fortunately, we had developed a relationship, so I could have easily ruined our relationship. But fortunately, we had created one, because he looked at me and said, now what are we doing now? I said, well, now I'm trying to come and figure, and ask you what I should have asked you earlier on. He said, I wished I could tell you that it's for my pregnant wife and my daughter, but the last time I got busted from pot, I lost a rental property. Now, I would have shamed him had we not developed a relationship that he knew I would accept that as an answer. He would have been too embarrassed to have told me that. So fortunately, in that instance, I didn't ruin the therapeutic relationship, although I have. And things that I have done. It's also about ambivalence. If I take what I think is the right side, you need to change because human nature says that the person must take the other side. No, I don't need to change because they feel unheard, they don't feel understood. Because if I ask in the group, how many people, you don't need to raise your hands and we won't ask for disclosures, but just to think, how if you have a behavior change for the betterment of your health, how many years have you been considering making that change? Either getting in shape, losing weight, quitting smoking, starting yoga, starting a exercise plan. And if I ask how many years you had been contemplating that, when I'm working with people, we get anywhere from 10 to 20 years been contemplating that. And, so if I just come in and tell a person why they need to change, they're the ones with the struggle, the 10-year struggle. They feel unheard and they don't feel any compassion or acceptance. So I want to hear both sides. You want to quit drinking, but on the other hand, you feel you'll never have fun again as long as you live. You'll never have friends. I want to see a psychiatrist, but I'm frightened of taking medication. And so I want to hear the I want to's and I don't want to's. Basically, this is just an overview of what makes up motivational interviewing. We have the spirit. We're going to talk about that. Acceptance. What's different than the 2013 motivational interviewing book that I showed at the beginning is 90% new text. All of the movement forward in motivational interviewing has been based on working and listening to clients and to patients, and also strongly on research about what helps people change and what gets in their way. So one of the new features of that is the 4 key processes of engaging people, focusing, evoking, and planning. And then the stages of change has always been a part. Declemente, Prochaska has always been a part of motivational interviewing. We have ORs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. Concepts we'll talk a little bit about, change talk, and tools of motivational interviewing. So again, if we take the spirit out, spirit is not about religion. Spirit is about those times that we have, I believe we've all experienced, I'll speak for myself, the many times on this trip, not being able to converse with someone and not share the same language and have a moment. Have a helpful connection moment where we connect with each other as human beings. And that has happened to me every single day. Help getting on the subway, help realizing I'd missed the subway. You know, all the things where people connect with each other is the spirit. It's spiritual values of friendship and freedom and all the things, kindness that we hold dear as human beings. It's about partnering with the person. How can I partner with you to work toward the behavior change that you have decided is the target behavior? Complete acceptance. Acceptance even if people don't want to change. Because all of us have, and should have, and do have the right to not decide to change. And then evoking, eliciting from them, what has worked before? What do you think would be helpful in this instance? I know I was working with a young man, Craig, and he was trying to figure out whether or not he was going to go in a residential treatment center. And so rather than give him advice, I said, now if you were working with one of your friends at Alcoholics Anonymous, I said, what would you suggest that you do next? And he said, I'd go down and sign in one of the sober house living quarters. And 3 months later, he said, I never will understand where I came up with moving in a sober living community. And that's the way that it should be. Motivational interviewing can elicit, but it is their victory. It is through their self-efficacy, it is through their strengths that they come to these decisions. Compassion about how, again, that we connect with people when we're as human beings. It's watching people. I watched people at the mental health center where they would save a cigarette butt for another, fellow patient, or give a sweater to someone that when I visited them underneath the bridge, and they were no longer able to interact with the world, even though I could see in their eyes a strong desire to be well, even though their symptoms said something else, that they gave that sweater we brought to them to another companion who was cold. That is compassion for each other, and that is the compassion that we bring in motivational interviewing. The acceptance is to show the absolute worth of another human being. The things that people have gone through that I will never experience, but the acceptance of them as a valuable human being, the autonomy, again, of their ability to decide, whether or not they want to change or not. I worked with a lady who didn't care if she died, and she was dying. And I consulted with a psychiatrist about my work with her, and he said, for whatever reason, she wants to come see you every week. And I had to finally put myself in a hospice situation, where as a hospice provider, it was providing comfort care. It wasn't going to be treatment or change. And when I went into that space with her, and I somehow got out of her way, and my fear for her and my feeling of urgency to get her into treatment center, she came in and went into a treatment center. Somehow she felt that from me, even though she continued to come, even though I was still stepping in her way. She went ahead with that complete acceptance with her autonomy. Accurate empathy, accurately seeing it from their eyes, understanding from their worldview, not from mine, but from their worldview. And affirming isn't congratulating or being a cheerleader, but affirming, making firm the changes that people. I'm glad to see you today. It probably took a lot for you to get here. What helped you get here? I would always ask people. They say, my grandmother brought me. You never cross Grandma. And I could have met with her for months and not known that her major support system was Grandma. And Grandma was going to get her there. Just asking those questions, affirming that they are there and in the chair is enormous. The 4 keys of engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. I can tell that in a quick little story. I had a young man come in. His mother called me and said, I'd like for you to see our 19-year-old son. He's been in 5 treatments. And he's getting out of treatment. We want him to go now into a 90-day treatment, and he doesn't want to go. And she said, can you advise me? Can we talk? I said, well, you might say 90-day treatment or go see this woman for an hour. 90 days, 1 hour. I said, once he comes in the door, once you have helped him in the door, it's my job to keep him in the door and engage him. He came in, he was very pleasant, sat down, crossed his legs, put his hands behind his head, and said, I said, well, what's it like? This is a reflection, motivational interviewing. What's it like to come and talk to a stranger about a problem? I'm cool with it. I'm all right. I said, well, has anyone else talked to you about your problems with pot? Oh, yeah, the policeman and, the judge and my mother and my brother and my sister and he named all these people. Now, I have to be careful with my tone. Because what I said was, well, let's not go in that direction. I need to be careful so that it doesn't sound like, well, let's not waste our time with that. So I said, well, let's maybe go in another direction then. I said, you must really like smoking pot. And he said, yeah, and I did. And I said, did you think I would tell you not to smoke pot? He said, yeah, I did, but I'm down with it. I'm down with it. You'll have your own way. So he was ready for the hour talk. So then I said, how would you like to smoke pot every day? He said, my girlfriend said I could smoke it twice a month. I said, did you want to smoke it 2 weekends a month? I said, did you want to smoke it 4 weekends a month? He sat there for a while. He said, no, I actually need to quit altogether. Now, he was engaged. We had engaged. Wasn't Rhonda, McKillip. It's the approach. We were engaged. He had now identified a target behavior. Then I began evoking how might he go about that? What would he do? What has he done before that has been successful? Evoke his plan, which led us into the planning. Now, was I concerned that he would go home and tell his mother that he liked me because I said he could smoke pot every day if he wanted to? Yes. And did he go home and tell her that? Yes. And was I concerned that she might call me and say, my son said said that he could smoke pot every day if they wanted to? Yes. And did she? And so, but she said, but the thing is, I figured you didn't say that, but I do want to call and let you know you are the only person he is coming back to see. It was the approach. He came back every single week. Did he quit smoking pot? No. Did he reduce his pot? Yes. Did I diagnose a major depressive disorder? Yes. Did he get on medication? Yes. Did we have a wonderful, productive time that we worked together? Absolutely. Stages of change, as we know, pre-contemplation used to be called denial. I don't have a problem. And so there's no need for a change. Contemplation, okay, I may have a problem, but it's not that bad. Preparation, all right, I have a problem, I should think of a plan. Early action, I like the division with Ken Minkoff has, early action. Better look at my time here, where I'm at. Late action is taking more. Is my time up? Okay, all right, I'll hurry. I was raised in Oklahoma, and we tell a really long story going from the mailbox and back. We don't do anything concise as that part. So I'm used to 2-day training, so I'm hurrying here. Let's take a look, though, at what the client is saying. Now, this looks like a problem to me, right? I do not have a problem. This is so unfair. I can't believe this is happening. Now, even though I may think this is a really big problem because it's detached from the wheel, if I look at what he says, he's indicating to me he's in pre-contemplation. He does not see that as a problem. If I looked at this situation, okay, this is a problem, but it's not that bad. This really is any addiction, isn't it? I'm not at the front of the train yet. It won't happen to me. But if I listen to what the person has said, it's contemplation. In this one, this really does look like a problem to me. But this person is saying, now this is a big problem. I need to figure out a plan, preparation. So if I listen to people, they will tell me about whether or not they consider it a plan or not. I want to go on to the concepts. We have to remove the word resistance. If we teach people that there's a resistant client, resistance really is when people don't do what we think they should do. If people agree with us, we call them insightful. If they disagree with us, we think they're resistant. And so then we want to break the resistance or break the denial and confront people. And so what we have realized is ambivalence is I want to change and I don't want to change, and listen to the pros and cons. Sustained talk is ways to sustain, they will mention the problem, sustain the behavior of that they're not going to, of drinking or not seeing physicians or not following the diet plan or insulin plan. Discord is a problem between us, and so we talk about that, something that's going on between us. Sometimes people are fearful you're going to refer them to treatment. So they're kind of, you can feel it. And then looking for change talk. The thing that I like the most about these are the tools that they use. If you looked at it, how important is it for you to make this change? I worked with a teacher. On a 0 to 10, I said, how important is it for you to go to residential treatment? She said a 6. I said, I didn't say why a 6 and not a 10, because she'd tell me it's not that bad. Why a 6 and not a 0? Because I've missed a lot of school and I have a problem with alcohol. What would it take to move that to a 10? She said, if I ever miss school again, I will never, ever, ever miss school again. In the next 3 months, she missed school 3 times. She checks in a residential treatment facility. She broke her own guideline, and to this day, she says that I saved her life. The approach gave her an opportunity to see what was kind of a bottom line for her. When I first started using motivational interviewing, I'm closing with this. When I first started using motivational interviewing, I thought it would take forever. I thought it'd be like Carl Rogers. So if I understand what you're saying, I think what you're saying is, and then they'd say it again. And then I say, well, so in other words, but I was asked to go into a lockdown psychiatric facility. I went in and she was completely prone. She was on 17 medications. It scared me because she looked like she was in a coffin. And it scared me, and I said, how are you doing? Well, how did I think she was doing? She'd been duct taped to the dash of a car to get her to a psych unit. She was in the lockdown psych unit. And even with 17 medications, she rolled her eyes. I said, is that the silliest question anybody's asked you today? She said, pretty much. So she said, I do not have a problem with alcohol. So I listened to her, just listened. And I said, it sounds like that alcohol is only a problem, that it makes your depression worse. She said, well, it makes it pretty bad. I told her that in an hour and a half, I thought I'd be there 15 minutes before she kicked me out. She began to talk about her life. I said, your faith reminds me of a story I heard about a child about faith and had a kite and stood on a hill, and you couldn't see the kite. And they said, how can you tell the kite's there? And they said, the tug on the string, or the tug in their life with faith. I listened some more. I said it toward the end. I said, it sounds like alcohol kind of makes your depression really bad at times. She said, my alcoholism has been a problem for me for 20 years. Can you please, please help me? As I left, and this was 45 minutes, and she's heavily sedated and in great trauma, as I left and put my hand on the doorknob, she looked at me and she said, till I see you again, I'll keep my hand on the string. I've told her I will tell her story. She's diagnosed with bipolar disorder and gambling addiction and all kinds of things. When she's manic, she talks about writing a book and becoming a psychiatrist so she can prescribe her own meds. But I told Linda that I would tell her story around the world until she writes her book. But she and I connected, and I thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I appreciate it.